Yeah, I'm Ken Tyler. I'm the chair of the Department of Neurology at the University of Colorado, and I've been the editor-in-chief of Annals as Cliff Saper's successor since 2022. It's impossible during my tenure not to mention COVID. It made us rethink, sort of the balance between things like getting information out fast and quickly so people would be aware of it, but also trying to ensure quality. I think we've also seen a surge that's continuing in areas like artificial intelligence and how we're going to use that. And so, we and other journals have seen a number of papers where, in neurology, where people are using AI type programs to assist them. Is that reading continuous EEGs? Is that analyzing MRIs in potential stroke patients or other things like that? I think it's been a major change, and I think how we approach this is still evolving. And at some level, AI can be like a professional editor. If I were writing in a language that wasn't my native language, for example, my paper would probably benefit from professional editing. I think the line that becomes more difficult is AI can change the content or the meaning of things, and you need to still ultimately have responsibility by human authors for content. And so almost all the journals are pretty unanimous in agreeing that AI doesn't meet the criteria for authorship because it can't really take responsibility for content. And so ultimately, like any tool we use to assist ourselves, the human has to ultimately be responsible for what the tool does. And we saw a massive increase in the number of papers that were being submitted during the COVID era. But interestingly, that trend, at least for us at Annals, has sort of continued. So every year we're receiving more and more manuscripts. Whether or not you can attribute any of that to AI versus we're increasingly an international journal, even though we're the official journal of the American Neurological Association. And we and many other journals have seen, say, an explosion of papers from places like China, India, and others. So it's a little hard to know what the factors are, but we've definitely continued to see an increase in manuscripts. One of the things that probably comes up every year if you had interviewed me would be, when is the paper journal going to finally see its demise? I think a lot of the journals, our own included, are trying to figure out, in a visual world with things like social media of all sorts of different types, how do you make your content more appealing to audiences that really use maybe even their cell phone as their primary source of information. If I look at the number of paper downloads we get in a year versus, let's say, our formal subscription base, the downloads is really approaching 2 million. It's between 1.5 and 2 million, downloads a year, and the subscription base would be a tiny fraction of that. So the reality is the online platforms are the way people are increasingly accessing content of journals, getting papers and things like that, and that trend doesn't show any signs of slowing down. We have a pretty broad spectrum of papers and Annals, like our peer general neurology journals do. And so it's a little bit, somebody I think once said that our editorial board meetings is sort of like the world's best journal club. Neurology, as I think you might know, is a family profession. So my dad was a professor of neurology at Harvard and the chief of what was then the section of neurology in the Department of Medicine at the Brigham. And so I sort of grew up kind of exposed to this. And in his era, I think he really felt that the ANA was sort of the pinnacle for an academic neurologist, almost an emblem that you had, been successful and accepted by your academic peers. And so I think it was clear that he was very proud when I became interested in the ANA and proud when I became, a member of the ANA. And the ANA really still has an intimacy to it and a sort of best of the best in terms of content that, always amazes me when I go to the meetings. in prior generations, a sort of, quote, old boys club nature to it, and I use the word boys specifically, and I think under the leadership of a whole successive era of presidents, I would credit Dr. Feldman in particular, there was sort of a feeling that really what our unique niche as the organization should be is academic neurologists throughout the lifespan. And as I say, even in my era, there was still pretty much a bias that you didn't put someone up for membership until they were an associate professor, sometimes even a full professor, and a sort of, you were already established in there. And now there's been a movement to sort of say our focus should be academic neurology throughout the lifespan. And I think that's been a wonderful change. Arguably, I think without it, the whole future of the organization would have been very uncertain. There's certainly professional organizations that, for example, publish a nice journal that a lot of people read, but they never attend an annual meeting, and other than being elected as an honorific, that's about their only contact with the organization. And that, I think, would have been one of the perils had the ANA not, taken this more open and inclusive, route that I think has been just tremendous for the organization. Always remarkable when you're, a resident, a fellow, even a junior faculty member, when you have the opportunity at an organization like the ANA to present a talk or have a poster, and somebody walks up whose name you recognize because in those days often their textbook was right on the shelf or right on your desk. Nowadays I don't know if we even use textbooks that much anymore, but I mean still the aura of having somebody who was literally to you a giant in the field, come up and talk to you about and really show an interest in who you were, the work that you were, that you were doing, was really tremendously exciting and reinforcing. And, I still think that opportunity to have the leaders in the field part of an organization and the size and the scope and the scale still within a realm that there's some degree of intimacy and ability to interact. It is a remarkable, opportunity. I'm very proud of having served under a number of ANA presidents, beginning, I think, with Justin MacArthur as an example, that really believed in what we would today worry about saying, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really felt it from the heart, not because it was the flavor of the week. And I think the future of our organization depends, as I said before, on inclusivity, not exclusivity, that we need to be a home for everybody, and the common theme should be academic neurology. Under some of the more recent presidents, also an increasing emphasis that even though we're the American Neurological Association, on the importance of some of these issues like global health and in our field, and we already talked about COVID. Unfortunately, we can't isolate ourselves, whether it's infectious disease or other areas from the rest of the world. And I think those initiatives are also ones that I think are exceedingly important if we're going to retain the prominence and the leadership role we have among professional societies. Neurology across virtually every single discipline has become a true therapeutic science, and those advances are just accelerating amazingly, whether that's neuroimmunology, whether that's epilepsy and new drugs or therapies, whether that's DBS and treatments for movement disorders and who knows what, and of course exciting but still unrealized areas from Alzheimer's disease through ALS through others that I think the science is driving novel ideas about therapy, and we're hopeful that one of those will be, a true home run. And I think if you go to the ANA meeting and you hear especially the plenary talks, which are typically spectacular, this sense of excitement that neurology is a moving field and a field where we can do things and really impact on very important parts of human health and quality of life, it is just amazing to me when I look back to what we would have been able to do even when I started. Thank you for doing this, and happy birthday to the ANA.